Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Well, it's wonderful to be here tonight for the launch of the Coalition for Marriage campaign to say no. It's okay to say no. As Sophie has said, our gay and lesbian friends already have freedom and equality under the law in this country, and that's as it should be. But if we change the definition of marriage, the freedoms and the rights of millions of other Australians will change forever. We saw a precursor to this back in 2015, which sent shockwaves through freedom-loving people in this nation, when the leader of the same-sex marriage movement in Australia, Rodney Croome, urged people to take an archbishop in Hobart to the Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Tribunal simply for distributing a pastoral letter outlining Christian teaching on marriage, that marriage is between a man and a woman, that children, wherever possible, should know the love of their biological mother and father. For that, Mr Croome, the leader of the same-sex marriage movement in Australia, said this was prejudice, it was hateful, and that Archbishop Porteous should be fined. He was tied up in a legal process for 6 months, brought by a transgender activist, Martine Delaney, a member of the Greens political party. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a precursor of what is to come should the definition of marriage be changed. It's only yesterday, since the intervention of the former Prime Minister John Howard, that suddenly, suddenly there is a recognition in the media, and those of us in the Coalition for Marriage have known this since December 2010 when the Greens kick-started this debate in the federal parliament. We've known about the vulnerabilities to freedom of speech and freedom of religion, but yesterday it took Mr Howard's intervention to remind people that parental rights and freedom of speech, freedom of religion is at stake here. And this is ironic, given that over December, January, there was a Senate inquiry that looked at the impact of same-sex marriage on freedom, and that report showed that there were serious vulnerabilities. And it's worth tonight noting what the chairman of that select committee, that Senate Select Committee, Senator David Fawcett from South Australia, had to say in his chairman's report. He said, if Australia is to remain a plural, tolerant society where different views are valued and legal, and I think all of us in this room would want Australia to remain plural and tolerant and to have different views valued and legal. This is what Senator Fawcett said. Legislators must recognise that this change will require careful, simultaneous consideration of a wide range of specialist areas of law, as opposed to the common perception that involves just a few words in one Act of Parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, our fellow Australians have been the victim of a campaign that says there's nothing to see here, there is no consequences, that all this involves is a wedding ceremony of a happy couple. And if that's all it was, I don't know that too many of us would have too much of an objection to that. But of course there are consequences that flow. Now, Senator Dean Smith from Western Australia, from the Liberal Party, and his colleague Tim Wilson, also from the Liberal Party, have put forward a bill. And this is the bill that's widely talked about by Yes campaigners as the sort of model that might come if the Australian people endorse this change. And the Yes campaigners say that this bill will protect freedom in Australia. Well, if you read the bill, all it contains is a very narrow set of protections for paid religious clergy only, priests, pastors, imams. Most of us, the rest of us in this room, get no protections, no religious protections. There's nothing in that bill that would protect a Julian Porteous again. There's nothing in that bill that would protect us from having a meeting like this in the future if we wanted to say that marriage was exclusively between a man and a woman. Our state-based anti-discrimination laws are weaponised as a result of this change in federal law. Now, I don't normally disclose the conversations that I have with parliamentarians, but I did at the Press Club this week, and it's really important because our Attorney-General, Senator George Brandis, a man I have great respect for his legal ability, but he's been one that has been saying there are minimal effects on freedom of conscience and freedom of religion and freedom of speech. But last year we met with Senator Brandis and we pointed out the vulnerability that's created by this change and how it triggers state-based anti-discrimination law. Now, he didn't disagree with that proposition, but his answer was, I'm changing a federal law, that's a problem for the states. Now, I think that is a pretty reckless approach to take when you know that fellow Australians are going to have their free speech, freedom of religion rights impacted upon. And this is the senator who was campaigning for a change to Section 18C of the Federal Racial Discrimination Act to facilitate free speech. What we will see here, if the law is changed, will make 18C look very mild in comparison. So until yesterday, when John Howard made his intervention, the Prime Minister was then asked about this issue and about how freedom would be facilitated. And to his credit, our Prime Minister said, "I'm a supporter of religious freedom even more than I am of same-sex marriage." And I welcome that. I think that's fantastic. But then in speaking to journalists, and I believe this was on Sky News, he said, if the yes side wins, he said, the way that freedoms will be protected will be thus. Private members will get a bill to protect religious freedoms, and there could be an amendment here and an amendment there, a debate about this. No doubt it will be amended and debated, and we don't have a majority in the Senate, and in any event, it's a free vote. Now, I have huge respect for our Prime Minister, but I think even he perhaps might be the victim of the very clever propaganda campaign by the other side, which has told us for years and years that there is no consequences to this. Now confronted with the reality, the Prime Minister is struggling to do what I know he wants to do in his heart, and that is preserve the freedoms of every Australian in the face of a potential change. But an amendment here, an amendment there, a bill there, a debate here, we don't control the Senate. That doesn't give me a lot of comfort that freedom of speech and freedom of religion will be able to be protected if this law is changed and if state-based anti-discrimination law is weaponised. Remember that it is the same-sex lobby, that same-sex marriage lobby, that refer to state-based anti-discrimination law as hate speech law. It is designed to stop people like us who are potentially haters and to silence us. And I think that's a terrible thing, terrible place to be in. Last weekend, the Yes campaign held big rallies here in Sydney and in other cities. Tanya Plibersek, the alternative Deputy Prime Minister, the Deputy Leader of the Australian Labor Party, put out an email to supporters saying, please come to these rallies, let's drown out hate with love. Well, let's just think about that. She is saying there in that email to supporters that those of us in this room who love our gay and lesbian friends but simply believe that marriage is a man-woman project for reasons we're going to hear tonight, that we are motivated by hate. Well, what does someone do who has high political office, potentially our next Deputy Prime Minister if they win the next election, what is someone who holds that high office going to do to people who she believes are motivated by hate? God help us. The Labor Party also has, and my criticism of politics is bipartisan tonight, you might notice, but the Labor Party also has in its national policy platform, and this is a policy they took to the last election, to have an LGBTIQ commissioner in the Human Rights Commission. That is someone to police the sort of speech that we would be saying today. This is very, very frightening, folks. All I want to say tonight, if Malcolm Turnbull, George Brandis and Bill Shorten don't know how your freedoms are going to be protected, vote no. Now, it's my duty to introduce our next speaker, and we're very privileged tonight to have a member of the Turnbull Cabinet, the Honourable Concetta Fierravanti-Wells, the Minister for International Development and the Pacific. She's been a great champion of marriage. Would you please welcome Minister Fierravanti-Wells. Thank you.